never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Hey now, you're a rock star. Get the show on, get paid. Only shooting stars break the mold.
Welcome to another episode of the NRL Allstars podcast. Barnesy here, your host of the Allstars podcast, back for another NRL SuperCoach team preview. This week, we have the St. George-Illawarra Dragons to do, and it's going to be a big episode because we've got a special guest on for this one from the official NRL SuperCoach team and over at News Limited, Dave Campbell. Mr. Campbell, welcome to the show, mate. This is your first one. I've done a couple with you over in the studio at News, but you finally come onto mine, so welcome.
It's always nice to reciprocate. Thank you for having me.
I'll take that as my payment for those appearances. You're also a big Dragons fan too, so this one should be a nice one for you to talk about, or depending on how you think they're going to go. And the year before last now, so I should have really got you on earlier, finished second as well. You were the runner-up, even though you couldn't win any money for it. You gave it a good crack in 2024, and that run that I was on, we were having a lot of good chats about that run home, and I was running in the top four for ages and fell out of it, and you ended up finishing second, mate. So I should be taking advice from you for sure.
I think we both had great runs that year. I think I just kind of that last few rounds I really kind of came home strongly, I think that going into that last round I was about 12th, something like that. And just even that last round, there was just so much movement. It was a crazy finish to the season. But yeah, thankful that I think in the end didn't quite get the top spot, because explaining to my wife why I couldn't claim $50,000 would have been a lot more difficult.
Well, if you weren't loving your job so much, you'd almost quit a week before, wouldn't you? Take the 50K. Don't think it would quite get through legals. Yeah. Well, look, we are here to talk about Dragons, so let's do that. The Dragons for this season, when we're having a look at the roster, I guess Atkinson is the big guy, big purchase, I should say, that you got that's come in. Also a big man in Josh Kerr that's come back to the Dragons after a bit of better form probably at the Dolphins than when he showed originally at the Dragons a few years ago. So pretty good. I think that you needed both of those. You needed a half of some sort and you needed another middle. But you did have a lot of losses too. So, I mean, Jack de Belin, people have varied opinions on him, but as a footballer, I think that he's done a very good job at the Dragons, and I was quite surprised to see him go. Lachlan Ilias obviously didn't get to do a lot or make much of an impact because he didn't play much first grade. Clemmer was probably the other big one, but, it's time to him to move on as well. So really pretty settled and probably filling a couple of holes that you needed to, particularly with Atkinson, which, there'll be a lot of pressure on him, I guess, for this season.
Yeah, I think it's good to see guys like him being brought in, because I feel like the Dragons in, probably the last decade just seem to, whenever they recruit, it just seems to be these guys right at the end of their careers. And even in the last couple of years, guys like Gutherson and Valentine Holmes, even though obviously they're amazing players, they're coming to the ends of their careers. And it just felt like we were never recruiting for a long term. We weren't recruiting to build something that might carry success over multiple years. It was just trying to patch holes in the here and now. And you saw that, when Aaron Woods came in, when, people like David Clemmer, that just seemed to be what the Dragons have been doing for the last 10 years. So to have someone like Atkinson, coming in, he's young. If he can build something into a long-term stint at the Dragons, it could actually turn into something that's a bit more tangible for the club.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously it's not going to affect anything for 2026, but you've got Keon Koloamatangi that's a perfect example of that different type of signing. Bloke in his prime, and you've managed to snare him as one of the best forwards, either middle or edge in the competition. It's an absolutely massive signing. So with guys like him and Atkinson, Like, you can see that the recruitment's been a little bit different the next couple of years. And the Dragons have changed heaps at head office too. They've got new C and other new staff in there as well. Obviously, Shane Flanagan's still there, so we'll still see Cole in the halves. But at least there'll be a couple of other small differences there for Dragons fans. And you got some young guys too. Like, we're going to get some cheapies and cows that we're going to talk about as well. But it's a time where some of those guys look like they're going to come through too, which is good. But how does this look for success and then translate to SuperCoach as well? So, look, for me, I'll start off, mate, to sort of softly bring you into it. I don't see them making the finals, and Shane Flanagan got very upset with that comment from a lot of people last year. Certainly the bookies copped an absolute spray from the Dragons, but I sort of see them as 10th to last. And I say last, like, I don't think they'll finish last. I'm not putting money on them. I think they're one of the top 3 favourites to be down there, but I don't think they will. But I certainly see that as sort of their range, 10 to 17. I just don't see them getting to the 8 yet. You mentioned the ages. Like, there's been a very clear decline in guys like Cook and Gutherson, even though I still think that they're decent players. And you are going to put some younger guys in. Atkinson's going to have some growing pains, and you still have those question marks on the spine that I don't think are going to be necessarily answered this year. So a lot of good young forwards too, I should say too. Like, I think the young forwards coming through are great. The Couchman brothers headlining that, Hamish Stewart, Egan. They're not going to translate, I don't think, to finals footy this year. So that's kind of where I have them. Are you thinking a little bit more optimistically, Dave?
No, probably not. I mean, I'm a seasoned Dragons fan. My heart can't be broken any longer. But when I look at the team, you just kind of, who's that X factor player, particularly in the pack, I think as well. Like, there's lots of, really great, I guess, workhorses there who'll go out and they'll do a job. But are they going to turn a game around for you? Is there that explosive player that can come in off the bench and change the face of the game? I just don't know if the Dragons have that. And you'd probably say that their most X factor players are probably the guys like Gutho and Val, who we mentioned earlier. And they're fine players, but age is becoming a factor. And they're not going to be able to continue carrying the kind of weight that they probably have in the past, not just for the Dragons, but at their previous clubs as well. So when I look at that roster, you see there's some potential there, but I just don't know if it's something they'd be able to sustain over a long season.
Yeah, I think that's really good points. And one of the things that's interesting for SuperCoach, though, that I'll say now that I am interested in with them and with their draw, which we're going to talk about in a sec, and that is they do tend to start fast. So they do like to come out of the blocks pretty fast. It's all, always the butt of the jokes when you get to mid-season and the Dragons are, going to be minor premiers, and then they start to fall down the ladder and inevitably miss the top 8 in recent seasons. It's been an ongoing trend. You did the same thing last year. There's a lot of SuperCoach players that we're going to talk about that started really strongly. So, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because with SuperCoach, but also in real life as a footy fan, you could fall into the trap of, oh, wow, they've turned the corner. But we've just seen this story so many times with them too, where they have a decent favourable draw at times at the start, and they go well, and then round 10 or something, they're like first, second, third or something, and then all of a sudden they start to drop down. I find it interesting for SuperCoach, though, because I feel like it can kind of target that type of team behaviour as well.
I mean, you can. Dragons Up will be interesting this year, though, just because of the potential cheapies that'll be on offer within the club, potentially. And, depending on what Shane Flanagan does with his starting sides at the start of the season, it might be a case of how many Dragons is too many Dragons for me to carry in my side. You want to make money and have as many cheapies as you can, but if Shane Flanagan decides to kind of run all of them, can we carry all of them? Is that too much a risk given, we don't see the Dragons, I guess, as, top half contenders on the ladder, that kind of thing. People might have to pick and choose who they carry as money makers in the Dragon because, I think that could be a big issue if all of the cheapies that have kind of been touted actually do get up.
Yeah. And Shane Flanagan's also shown before that he doesn't like sometimes playing young guys. So there is also a bit of a minutes thing where he might lean on some of the veterans and stuff. Let's have a quick look at the draw, though, because to me, I find it quite interesting. There's some stuff I like about it. But then I also, and for SuperCoach, again, especially for those people watching or listening for the first time, on these team previews, we're talking about your team for round 1 that you're constructing for SuperCoach. So really, it's the first month and then the second month that are the main ones to look at, right? So the first month, 3 out of 4 are away, which isn't a good thing for the Dragons. But I do like some of the matchups. So the first one's against the Bulldogs. And even though the Dogs have been a good defensive team, like the Dragons have had some good games against them, and particularly individual SuperCoach performances against them have been decent. Against the Storm round 2 is tough, but it is at Wynn Stadium. That's heaps better than going down to Amy Park for the Dragons. But then you're away twice against the Eels and the Titans, which are decent matchups. But this is where I think the draw starts to open up, because you go into the second half of the first 2 months, and after that second round Storm game, Eels, Titans, into the Cowboys at home, into the Manly Sea Eagles at home, and then away versus Souths, and then the Roosters before the round 9 bye. You will play the first big bye round in round 12, so you're probably going to be holding guys through that round 9 bye, but that's pretty easy to do at that point. But I really like that middle run, like Eels, Titans, Cowboys, Manly, Souths. That's a good 5-game run, and none of those 5 teams played finals football last year. So as much as we think that they'll improve, and many of them may very well, they're still guys that didn't make top 8 last year. Are still favourable SuperCoach matchups. So I kind of like the first couple of months, even though there's some tougher games in there, even though you've only got the one home game in the first month. There's some really good matchups.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing for me within that first month will be the fact that they are one of the Vegas teams.
Yes.
And how they manage the travel home. And then, yes, Melbourne's at home in the second round, but, they do end up at the Titans up in the Gold Coast in round 4. So Vegas and the Gold Coast in the first 4 rounds, it maybe doesn't sound too onerous, but I just wonder whether if they don't manage that transition back from Vegas to Australia well, what kind of flow-on impact that could have into that second month of the competition, where you'd think they're coming up maybe against some softer opponents that they're a better chance with. But if they haven't, if all of those teams have been in Australia the whole time and that transition back from Vegas hasn't been managed well, I wonder how much of an impact that could have.
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's going to be a question for all the Vegas teams, really, isn't it? How they're going to manage that, because it is split round 1. They do have an extra week after that, but anybody who's been overseas, especially with the time difference with like America, it's such massive jet lag, and some people get it for days on end, and particularly when you're an elite athlete, it can be tough. Let's talk players. To me, I'll say overall before we talk about individuals that I kind of looked at this team and went, yeah, the Dragons are really more about the young guys, the mids and cheapies this year for SuperCoach. There's a couple of top-end guys, but most of it's mids and cheapies. But I will say the first couple of guys that we're going to talk about, particularly the first one, is probably the most interesting. Valentine Holmes, when we're going down our gun list to start with, he's 734,200. And I have stacked my centre wing quite a bit, but I've sort of rejected him in a way, because I've sort of gone, look, I kind of prefer Eero if I'm going to go for a bit of a pod. And I've got, guys like Latrell Mitchell's quite a bit cheaper as a goal-kicking centre. And then there's other guys like Herbie that are the premiums that you can pay up for. I've sort of I liked him, but left him out because of all the other options that I preferred. And then I started going through the numbers for this show, and I was like, man, he looks really good. And it's coming off a 75 average. The year before he did 80, the year before he did 72. So he's been very good for the last 3 seasons. But when you look into the numbers a bit more, 86% of his games were 60 plus, which for a centre wing is just ridiculous. And the 2 games that weren't 60 plus were 40 and 58. And then you go, well, how is he going with 70 plus? And it's 9 out of his 14 games are 70 plus. Well, he's probably got a bad floor like he used to have. Actually, he had 44 base power, which is really good. And then you add 13 points a game in goal kicking points, and you go, geez, no wonder he fell over 60 points almost every game in his sleep. And then you look at the fact that, well, his tries were actually his lowest since 2021. Did only play the 14 games, which is a worry because it was a serious injury. But, his tries could go up. his assists will go up, and he's one of those ones that Tommy Sangster over at your office has spoken about, one of the big upticks in points comparison under the new stats provider, Valentine Holmes, going up by almost 10 points a game, I think it was, or pretty close, 7 or 8 or something. So you look at all that and go, wow, the numbers just scream he's a great option.
Yeah, I mean, I think the new scoring provider is one of the key things there. You look at him, average 75 last year. Then, but if you overlay the new scoring system on last year's performance, his scoring would actually go up 8.7%. And so you kind of look at that and you go, well, would I take Val Holmes at a 75 average? If I have that new scoring system, would I take a Val Holmes at about 83 average? And because that's potentially what we're looking at this year. If he pumps out the same performance, he's actually scoring more under the new system. And yeah, based on that kind of analysis, he's one of the biggest movers in that space. He benefits hugely from this new scoring system. So I think you have to yes, he's a lot of money, but we've seen that the centers and the wings are probably the guys who are going to benefit the most out of the transition into this new stats provider. So we tend to use the center wing position as a way to stack our cheapies and make a lot of that money. But probably have to give some serious thought this year to, do you start with a couple of guns because of that transition? It could pay off early, particularly with guys like Val.
Yeah, when you're looking at points per dollar that you spend, which is really critical in the early rounds when your cap's not huge, it's really, really big to get that type of value in the elite scorers. So it's got to be an option. To me, when I looked at the scoring, it was definitely the centre wings and also the hookers with the extra tackles. But I also changed. I had a couple of wingers in my centre wing that I moved to centres just because of this new change as well. I think Holmes is a great option. The only thing I would say against him is that he does have that layoff from injury that has been big. So he is coming back after missing half of last season. And he's also, I guess, pretty reliant on the Dragons starting well. So he's someone you could start with one of the Dragons forwards, and it doesn't really matter if they don't have a good start like they have in many of the last few seasons. But if they don't have a good start, then Holmes is extra value you're not going to see at the start anyway. And that's a big risk for me. I don't believe hugely in the Dragons this year. So I'm very torn, Dave, because I don't know whether I can say, look, I'm going to pay out for Valentine Holmes because they should start well, because I can just see them, hurting me really bad. And it's also hard too, because you go, well, with some guys, you go, well, I'll wait and see. And if I need to burn a trade, I will. But look, I can't do that because the first 2 games are the hardest. It's like the Dogs and the Storm. And then it's like, well, do I really want to sell in that Eels game or even after the Eels game when he's going to go Titans, Cowboys, Manly, South? Because that's a good run of games for him. So it's like you're kind of stuck with him if you start with him. And then also you're also stuck not to get him in later if you don't, because round 9 they've got to buy, and then he's going to be a shoe-in for Origin.
I think the concept of burning trades is probably something that people really need to be careful about this year with the transition to the new system, because there's the way we think about the game and the way we structure our teams, it's got to change because there are differences. And I think there's going to be a lot of players that people have this year that they think, yep, that'll work because they've always worked, and then they don't. Or that'll work because I've looked at the new system and I think this is the way to go, and then it doesn't end up like that. I think people are really going to need early trades this year, and to fix those things where you suddenly go, actually, you know what, under the new scoring system, this isn't going to work and I need to pivot. That's what you're going to need your trades for. We're not going to have the luxury this season of going, I'll wait and see on that guy. And if I need to bring him in, I can, because I think we're going to have spot fires that we have to put out elsewhere in the team as we all get used to what the new stat provider means for our overall SuperCoach experience.
Holmes is also going to have Tui Tupuola outside him as well. and he had a massive try-scoring season, even though he missed most of it. When he was there, he was a try-scoring freak, and that's going to help Holmes as well. So, unfortunately, the more I look at it, the more I think I need to get Holmes in my side. So it's really quite difficult for me. He's a great option. We're going to talk about one of the other guns though. Clint Gutherson, 648,700. He was your second leading SuperCoach scorer for the season. And look, I'm an old school Gutho fan. I love Clint Gutherson, always have. He is older now. He definitely had a decrease. When you look at the last few years, he's gone 79, 69, and 66 last year. So there has been drop-offs. He is at an expensive price point, but he's not as expensive as he could be. So he'll be an ultra pod. Okay, he's still coming off a 66 average, which I found astounding because I know that he started well, but I kind of thought that he really fell off. When you have a look at his numbers, I'm not considering Gutherson at all myself, but his numbers to start last year, he averaged 70 points a game plus between round 1 and 9, and it was also the worst try scoring rate that he's had since 2016. He started the season 3 out of 4 tons. And they're against sides that he's going to be playing early on. And you just sort of look at it and you go, geez, I can't start with Gutherson, but these numbers, like against the Bulldogs, 113 points round 1. Against Souths round 2, 146. Third game, threw up 47 versus Melbourne. Oh, okay, he's back on the downturn. And then he goes 130 versus the Eels. Like, he just had a killer month. And he still had another couple of tons in there as well with 5 for the season. So, I mean, look, I couldn't possibly go him. He had some terrible runs, but he is someone that starts well as well, like the Dragons do. And he is one of those sneaky pods. I'll say, like in draft, I reckon you'll get Gutherson super cheap, and he could be a really good start for people in draft.
Yeah, he was interesting. Like because when he came from the Eels, he was on that busted knee, and you just thought like he's not gonna do it. But there's always a player every year, right? Pulls off a massive score, and you go, oh yeah. And then they do it again, and you go, oh, it's a coincidence. And then they do it again. You just think it can't keep going. It can't keep going. And then they just do. Gutherson was that guy for me last year where you're just like, no, it'll end. And yes, it did eventually end. But that first that first couple of months of the season, you just sat there going, he can't keep doing it. He can't keep doing it. But he just did. That being said, he's, where Val Holmes is one of the guys who would benefit from the new scoring. Gutherson's one of the guys who would have come back down slightly. So he's a negative 3.7% on last year's score if you overlay that new system. And I think that's pretty consistent across fullbacks in general from what I've seen. So, when you're looking at that spot, I just think there's better fullbacks in the game that you want to target if you're going to spend that kind of money. He's a great player, but yeah, you just kind of wonder, can he keep it going? He always seems half busted somehow, but he keeps dragging himself on. I don't know. You'd just be fearful, I think, if you kind of started with him. But the people who did last year, hats off to them. They reaped the rewards of that gamble early on. And then hopefully they jumped off in time and recognised when it was time to do that. But I couldn't start with him this year either.
Well, he made like 100K or more than that, like 130, 150K when he could have jumped off. Can I just say, the stat of the week here, Bulldogs round 2, last season his 2 Bulldogs games were 113 and 103 points. So, and out of those 5 tons, 4 out of those 5 teams he plays in the first 2 months.
That Bulldogs stat is actually all the more impressive considering how defensive that team has become over the last couple of years. That's what they've built their game around. So the fact that he did that not once but twice is actually remarkable in of itself, just given that who that opposition was.
Yeah, and I feel like that the Dragons, as I thought would happen, definitely leaned on Gutherson to be their creator. He was basically one of their halves because, as we know, King Tongia and Flano were there a lot of the season, and they're not huge creators for points for the Dragons. And I still don't see that changing hugely. Like I still feel like they have to lean on Gutherson for the assists, so he's still going to get get a ton of them. Yeah, draft is interesting. Classic, I could see someone hitting gold again. I just couldn't do it for all the risk and the other options there. But the last gun that we're going to mention before we move on to the next category is Toby Couchman, who had a bit of a breakout year. 588,300. I really liked Couchman last year, and him and his brother look like great young forwards for the Dragons. I am the opposite on him, though, Dave, compared to, Gutho and Holmes, where when I dug into the numbers, I was really quite impressed and surprised. With Couchman, I was kind of worried about him as an option more after I sort of looked at it. Now, I know that's a bit of a hot take, but he's almost 600,000. And he did have like around a 62 average when he started at front row forward. And it also includes an injury affected game. So he really should be like a 65. That's in 58 and a half minutes. And I guess that's kind of key. Is he going to get 58 and a half minutes as a starting front rower? Because the Dragons had injury concerns. He had a few games there that was 70 or 80 minutes even playing in the middle. And it's really hard to have a look at it and sort of determine it. His PPM went down slightly when he did play a starting larger minute role. And I just sort of look at it and go, well, some people will say the upside is his attack, but if he doesn't really have a lot of attack, then you're paying for that meat and potatoes early 60s, which I would be fine with, except the price point is almost 600K. So it's quite difficult. And you look at some of the guys that have those upticks, like you mentioned, like I'm sure Couchman will, but I look at someone that's almost 100K cheaper in like a Hopgood who does have a really good uptick in the new stats provider. And you go, well, it's a lot cheaper. And he sort of played at his floor already. So it's a bit of a mix, mate. Like I'm not sure where he'll be at for his minutes and role. I'm sure he'll have good minutes and role, but will it be good enough? And also, is he better than some of the other options?
Yeah, I mean, Couchman's one of the guys. Yeah, he's got an 8% uptick in the new system based on last year's performance. Yeah, I think the meat and potatoes stuff that you mentioned I think that's going to be the standard week in, week out. I don't know if there'll be too much else there on offer. Attacking stats will come and go, but I just don't know if that'll be the norm for him. And I think if for that kind of money, you want to target someone who, has a greater ceiling potential. And I just don't think that's there for Couchman. I think what you see is what you get week in, week out. He'll be consistent for you, but I don't think he's not gonna knock out those higher scores occasionally that you really want to see for someone that you're bringing in. And yeah, he's a great player. He's a great workhorse from an NRL perspective, but from a SuperCoach perspective, there's probably better options that give you way more attacking upside.
Yeah, I tend to be in that boat too. And it doesn't even have to just be like try scoring or line breaks or assists. It can just be the power stats. And he just doesn't really have the offload or the tackle breaks in him. And, that might come, maybe he'll develop his game, but I want forwards that can either offload, break tackles, or that are genuine try scorers to be mixed in as far as ceilings go. And he's just all base. Like 53 of his 60 points per game was just raw base, and he didn't have a hell of a lot else. He's got a little bit in there, but not much.
But that 53 in raw base is great, but he needs to develop his game beyond that to add in, the offloads and those things that just, he doesn't have to score a try every week, but an offload game, something like that could add an easy extra 10, 20 points a week. And unless he's developing something like that into his game, that 53 is all you can expect.
Yep. Fallen gun time. Damian Cook. What a sad demise. 4 years prior to last year, he was 66, 75, 65 and 68 point SuperCoach averages. And then he goes to a 54. Now, some of that was minutes, but not all of it. He still averaged 66 minutes a game. And he was obviously not playing 80 minutes at all. Just about. He had no 80-minute games until mid-season. And then he had like half a dozen, but that was really just due to injuries.
And I think that minutes there is the key thing because last year it was basically like a 10-minute drop in per game. He averaged 66 minutes in 2025, and I think it was 75 minutes the year before. And that's actually been coming down for a number of years. But that was a pretty steep decline year on year, 2024 to 2025. But I don't see that jumping back up again, really, unless, there's some chronic injuries in that roster that means he's going to start pumping out 80-minute games. I just don't see that happening. Minutes are the thing for Cook, I think.
Yeah, and under the new stats as well, tackles, a lot of extra will go to hookers, and he's a perennial third man-inner, so he'll get a few of those. But I reckon that'll be offset by the fact that he'll probably lose more minutes now. Like, you've re-signed Little, and I think that Little will actually get more minutes than, say, 14 minutes a game. So I think really, Cook's probably looking at a 60-minute or less role, which is another 10+% drop off what he's already done. So even for draft, I would be really cagey about getting him in on draft, even because of all the risk factors and the fact that he's going to turn 35 in June, which is a remarkable career. He's done great. Obviously, the beach sprinting he did early on for training helped him out with that, but had to be mentioned when we talk about Cook. But yeah, he can't be an option. But a rising gun who can be an option. Another young forward, Hamish Stewart. Now, obviously, you've got Jack de Belin that's moved on, would take a fair few middle minutes. Hamish Stewart looked pretty good when given the opportunity. 102,000, Dave, but in 6 games where he started at 13, he was 51.5 points per game, which did see his PPM dip slightly. But if he can be anywhere in the 50s on his price point at the moment, like he might even have like a 20+ point, uptick in where he's priced at, and that's really good money making it 400,000. It is a little bit of an awkward price point at 400. You'd rather sort of 300 to 350. But, is he going to start there first of all, do you reckon? And if he does, like, can you trust Flanagan's minutes enough to say, look, he's going to get about 50+ minutes a game and be able to give us scores in the 50s?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to get there, but I think you nailed it. Shane Flanagan's the big wild card in that equation. You mentioned, I think earlier, that he doesn't tend to like giving too much to his young players. I don't know. It's a big question mark for me, and that price does make me err on the side of avoid. You'd probably want to target someone who's a bit more of a genuine cheapie there. But, I mean, depending on how your trades go, depending on how the Dragons start the season, if you don't have too many other issues in your team early on, he's one that you can probably watch for a couple of rounds so you can make that judgment. And then if you've got the trades, he might be someone, especially if you've got someone who you paid extras for that hasn't worked out, he might be a good downgrade option as someone who's solid, who'll make some money, and you can upgrade elsewhere with the money you've saved if there's a gun that you've started the season with and it hasn't quite worked out the way you thought.
Yeah, and I tell you, I agree with everything you said, and I'll add another layer to it. The biggest thing for Hamish Stewart is competition at the price point. At 400,000, there's guys that I really like Lukey. At the Cowboys, who you're going to get big minutes from. And then other guys like if McEwen's starting, obviously, at the Knights. And then you've got Mooney, who's a dual front row forward, second row forward at a similar price point. And then we've got all these cheaper guys too. Like, you've got the Buys and the Patstons and all these other guys that are going to be cheaper as well to put in. So you can't really fit them all. And I just don't really see a place for Stewart. I think that if he's starting in other years, he would have more of a place, but because there's just so many other options around the price point or cheaper, or even going up to the 500K mark where you can get like a Leka Halasima if he's starting, and some guys like that, it's really hard for me to go to a Stewart option. We're going to talk pod now. I mentioned him a little bit earlier. Tui Tupuola. What a season the money man had. He was killing it to start with. And it's really hard with him because it's like 670,400 to find out whether he can keep scoring tries. He scored 7 tries in his first 6 games, averaging 86 points across that period to start last year. And that was before he had his hamstring injuries basically derail his season. So you can't even really look at his average for the year because he played such few games. But that first 6 games averaging 86 and how he scored tries was electric. And his average overall also includes like a 0-point game. So when you go to his overall season average, it actually goes up to 77 if you take the 0-point game out for the season. He's almost a 45 base power, excluding the injured game, and he was a try-scoring freak last year. He is the ultimate pod. Like, if he doesn't have hamstring issues or anything, he just looks like that he could be one of the lowest owned, highest scoring centre wings to start the year if the Dragons can just score some points.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he's playing alongside Val on that side, which is another plus for him, because we know the quality player that Val is. Interestingly, with the new scoring system, he was actually flat. He didn't really gain or lose points under the new system, which I thought was interesting, given the narrative that centers and wingers stand to benefit from this. His 2025 performance didn't really fluctuate much at all. Yeah, 670,000. I think that's the bit that just makes you kind of go, is that too much of a risk? Because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, and a lot of money in a position that is quickly stacking up with cheapies as well. When you're talking about how many high price guys do we want to bring in versus cheapies into that position? Do you want to bank that kind of cash on someone that's a little bit more sure, a little bit more proven? I think he'd be like, you'd watch him through your fingers, I reckon.
Well, there's these, honestly, like, again, another one that I can't start, and I agree with you, but like, you look at it and go, there's going to be some of these guys to start the season, because it happens all the time, right? Which is just like, who are you crazy people who are picking these players and they're averaging like 80 points a game? And there'll be one or two that do it over the first 5 or 6 weeks and no one owns. He could very well be one of them, So like, we'll both rule him out. Neither of us have the balls to start with him. But he could easily be the best pod of the first month of the season. And he could also, if he carries on even 80, 90% of what he did last year, he'll be a keeper at centre wing by season's end if he stays on the field and he can just replicate some of that form. So I'm not going to say he's not an option, because he is, but geez, you're going to need big kahunas to go there. And we've got a similar guy here that we may as well talk about as well, because it's very similar, but he's a lot cheaper. And that is someone who was heavily impacted by the new scoring and is now looking at a big uptick, and that is Moses Suli. Suli has the benefit here of only costing 475,000. So you sort of go, you know what, I don't mind paying that, even if it's a dud. I can sort of sell that and leave it if it doesn't work and it's not going to hurt too much. His average does also include a 40 and 64 minute game as well. But when you're looking at his averages, it's just not pretty. Like, he's never been any good. He's been 49, 48, 47 and 52 average the last 4 years. And he's always been a guy that I basically said is a spud. He's kind of a nothing player for SuperCoach. He doesn't do anything particularly well. But now you look at it and go, well, if he can get like 10 points up in value just by doing the same stuff, and you have a look at the numbers, he's got a base power of about 42, which isn't great, but he only had one try last year. One try. And under the new scoring system, he had 8 last touches. It would be try assists and line break assists. And you kind of go, well, imagine if he just scores like 3 or 4 tries.
Yeah.
And he's got that uptick, and he's only going to cost about 475k. Like, there's a lot to like about it, except for the fact that it's Moses Suli.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, isn't he, where sometimes you just watch him and it's rocks or diamonds. He's either going to have an absolute blinder of a game, or he's going to be dropping the ball, passing to the grandstand, or all these things all at once. But yeah, as you said, the new scoring system, he was one of the biggest. He's 15% uplift under the new system.
It's just crazy.
That for him, that would equate last year to an extra 146 points. So I mean, it's massive. I think, when you look at that average of 49 for him last year, and you kind of go, well, is that average actually more around the 60 mark? He's getting up there. I mean, but again, similar to Tupuola, you're probably watching him through your fingers. But you'd expect him to score more than one try a season. For him to have one try last season is abominable. And, a few more along with that uptick with the scoring system could mean a massively different season in 2026. Actually don't mind him as a, sort of a pod play, because purely if you're overlaying what that new stat system will look like on paper, he's a guy that you should be looking at.
Yeah, I'll tell everybody a little secret, and I'm ashamed to admit this one. That's why it's a secret. I've looked at my side trying to find money and an extra pod and gone, I might actually change Brian To'o to Moses Suli. And I'm going to have nightmares about that over the next week because it just sounds sickening. But yeah, it's more than $100,000 difference, and he might match him, So it's one of those ones that I'm considering Suli, and I think that he needs to be a consideration, mainly because he's so cheap at $475K with all the upside that could be there. I think it's an easy risk to take as opposed to the Tui Tupuola risk and some of those other guys that are a bit more expensive. Let's talk about a controversial take and mistake that I think people might make, particularly new super coaches. Before we do, I'm just going to quickly mention a great sponsor of the Allstars podcast in oneworldcourier.com.au. You can jump on and go to oneworldcourier.com.au today and create a free account. If you've got any shipping needs for you, your business, or just a business that you work for, they'll take care of you. Just put in Allstars podcast is where you heard about them. They'll give you a great rate card. But what they've got there is a compare the market type of website where you punch in exactly what you want to send, where you want to send it, and they'll tell you how much it is across all the different types of carriers, and you just choose which one and they take care of it all for you. Great service and great support of the podcast, One World Courier. Jayden Su'A has, for 2 years, put egg on my face, David. I've thought that he's no good. And then he puts up a 67 and 63 point average the last 2 years. And now again, I'm here 3 years in a row, hoping 3 times lucky that I say he's a dud and you shouldn't do it at 619,000, that I'm going to be right. But he's going to be starting again on an edge. And he's averaging 60s the last couple of years pretty easily and had some big games. So, I mean, am I silly just going for Su'A again here and just saying don't do it?
Last year, I think it's a valid argument. The 66, 67 average that he had in 2024 was about 10, 12 points better than his, previous seasons. And so, we see guys that break out seasons and, they go crazy, and then the next year they're kind of back down to earth. But he just didn't do that last year. Yes, it wasn't as high as 2024, but it was still a 60-plus year for him. So, I mean, I'm willing to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess, in terms of that. He showed that it wasn't a one-off year in 2024, So, he's probably not someone I'd have from a super coach perspective, but from a, an NRL perspective, you kind of go, okay, he showed definite improvement 2 years ago. He backed it up last year. There's no reason for him to not continue this year unless something kind of goes horribly wrong for him. I'm willing to kind of give him that.
Oh, he's definitely earned it. He had a game last year, which I remember well because it was against my Roosters, where he scored 126 points with only 1 try. And I can't believe that he did that. So it's in draft. It might be quite a viable option in draft to look at him very late in your draft because he'll probably be there. I'll ask you a bit of a positional question though, because he's obviously an edge back rower. Well, a lot of predicted teams have got Su'A on one edge and Egan on the other. I didn't think Egan would be right for the start of the season, so I need to double check whether that's going to be the case. But then you've also got Ryan Couchman and big Luciano Leilua, who's going to be on the bench, right? Now, those guys can play edge or middle, and is there a chance that we see either of them take minutes away from a Su'A?
Luciano Leilua is the interesting one there, I think, because he got told at the end of it's a contract year for him. So he's trying to get a new contract, and we've seen how players can perform when they've got that pressure on top of them. They just always seem
he got paid over $700,000 a year last time he was in a contract year. So.
They just seem to find another gear, another level when they're playing for a contract. So I don't think, that's a factor, definitely. But he got told at the end of last year, you are not where we need you to be. You need to sort yourself out physically And if you don't, there's no contract on the table for you. You're going to have to find another club. Shane Flanagan said in the last little bit, he's come back. He's trained hard over the preseason.
Trained the house down.
Well, but he's lost about 10 kilos. I've seen reports say 10 kilos. I've seen other reports say around 12 or 15. But, let's say he's lost 10 kilos. And Flanagan said, in terms of, the training camps they've been doing, the beach runs and all those kinds of things, he's not winning them. Gutho's winning them like he normally does, but he's also not at the back of the pack like he traditionally has been. So based on all of that, like, he's putting in the work. He's, lost the weight they want him to lose. He's doing the training they want him to do. And there's results there for him. And he's playing for a contract. He's a really interesting case this year. And I think because of that, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up starting because, I think Flanagan said he's been really impressed with Leilua. Having had that conversation with him at the end of last season and seeing everything that he's done up until this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Flanagan rewards that because everything that he's been saying has been really positive around Leilua and the work he's put in during the preseason. So, I just would not be surprised if you do see Leilua starting on an edge at some point.
Firstly, I don't think people want to know the sorts of things I would do for a $700K contract. I would absolutely lose 10 kilos. You want me to lose 25? You want me to be like Christian Bale in The Machinist? I'll lose 40 kilos, 50 kilos. I'll do it. Like, it's amazing what a large new contract offer can make people do. And I've seen the house train down stuff, and I've seen the coach talk about it as well in detail. So I completely buy it, and I've seen pictures of him too. So it's not photoshopped. It's real. But how does he fit in? And it's a great segue. So I've got to say, obviously, David Campbell is a professional. He's done this before because he segued nicely into our mids and cheapies discussion to finish off the podcast on. Leilua is going to be around 400K, 420K in fact. And funny thing with Big BJ, Luciano, can't call him BJ, SuperCoach gun of the past. Luciano had no attack last year. He had 0 tries and next to no other clutch attack stats at all. And that's normally something that he does have a little bit of. And it's 43 as an average for the season is his worst average basically since he broke into the NRL. The years before his 43 were 56, 53, 52, and 62 as a gun back in 2021. Now, his minutes dropped all the way down to 58 minutes a game. This is going to be the issue for him. It's, he only played 67 minutes a game in 2024 and he was 13 points a game better. So that's a lot of value at around the 400K mark for the second row forward spot. The issue is it can be a massive trap, and it always can be with any Leilua that you're talking about. But with Luciano, he could start and get yanked off and only play 58 minutes still. And Couchman could come on or whatever and he gets spelled. And it's just such a risk because if he does that, he could be the fittest man in the world. And if you only get 2 or 3 points of value, he's just going to spud it up there. You're not going to be able to play him and you're not going to be able to make any money out of him. So it's really awkward. If he started and played 80 minutes or even just 65 plus minutes, it's going to be a really underrated mid-range play and one that everyone will laugh at you about. Your friends, your family, your mum will even laugh at you. So doesn't even need to know about SuperCoach and she'll think it's crazy. But in about a month into the season, you'll look great about it. And it's all about if with those minutes for Flanagan and his rotation.
Yeah, but I think it's what he does with those minutes when he gets them. Even if his minutes are, sit at where they were last season, which was down on historically for him. I think that the fact that he's playing for a contract is big for him because, he's one of those players that he can't just go out there and just put in a good performance because he's a good player. It's about the emotion and the energy that's around him. He thrives on that. So I think that the energy and the emotion that he will get from it being a contract year for him will be huge for his performance. He's going to know that even if he's got less minutes, when he's out on the field, he needs to make that count or this is his future. I think that'll be massive for him. I really do. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that average jump back up to where we're used to seeing him this year because I just think that'll be such a massive factor for him because that's the kind of player he is. He's not he's not going to go out and produce the same performance every week in, week out, with that kind of consistency. It's about those extra factors for him, and that's going to be hanging over him for a lot of the season. I think it'll influence massively how he performs.
Yeah, it's a good call. A lot of questions still. Maybe some trials would be good to see him in, and certainly, obviously, being named to start round one would be what you need, even if you're thinking about him, to see whether he can start or not. The other guys, probably, we'll talk about Atkinson first. Atkinson is the most popular out of all the cheapies and mids, and for good reason. He's come over from Cronulla, where he only averaged 21 points a game in 2025 because he didn't really have a role. He was that utility off the bench. He didn't start any games. No real big minute performances aside from one game where he played 66 minutes and he scored 71 points. Everything else is below half a game, and most of them are in the teens. Oh, except at the end of the year, he scored 51 off 80 as well. But the year before is probably the best to look at. 43 points a game in 2024. 15 of those 17 games, he was a starting half. But so you could basically pin him on that to say he's around about a 50-point average. And at that point, you go, well, that's pretty good. And you know his job security is going to be decent because he's a new buy. He hasn't had a chance with them yet. You would think if one of the halves was going to get dropped, it would be Flanagan, although obviously he does carry the Flanagan name, so maybe not. It's interesting with Atkinson because he's up against another cheapie in someone like Sanders at Canberra, who also has some opportunity there and may even goal kick. And if you go the double cheapie halfback route, then it's an even bigger issue because you can't have like a Cleary or a Hines or one of these premium guys. But I have seen some of those builds. So how does Atkinson fit into your SuperCoach team?
He's definitely an option. You need to make money, right? I don't know if I'd be confident enough to do a double cheapie there. I think you still want a gun there to shore up that position. So yeah, maybe you got to make a call on whether it's Atkinson or someone else. But he's cheap. He's 235,000. And I think that don't take last year. The Sharks did him dirty last year after he announced he was going. But I think that year before, like we saw what he could, like that was an aberration, sure, that Melbourne Storm game where he just controlled that game and they beat Melbourne in horrible conditions, I think, from memory. I think it was pouring rain as well. But, he showed the kind of player he can be. And, that's the player the Dragons will be hoping they get. But I think if you take that player from that Melbourne game and say, this guy's 235,000, come on. But there's a lot of money to be made there. And I just think you'd be silly not to take it.
Well, I tell you the one thing that does worry me a little bit to finish off on Atkinson as an option. I think he's a definite option. I'm having trouble deciding between him and also Sanders. But the thing that worries me is even in those games that we're talking about, he was playing with Nicho Hynes there. And I just think playing with Kyle Flanagan, he's going to really need to take charge of that team when I don't think he's ready for it. And between the two of them, neither of them are alpha playmakers, neither of them are representative players or anything, neither of them are near stars. It could be a lot of pressure on him. Whereas, if you get those guys like Atkinson playing with someone like a Hines or even some, a different star or veteran, it's a lot easier for them. So I do worry a little bit about his output with that, and I do think that we could have a floor where we see a 38 average, a 40 average, a 41 average or something. And then all of a sudden it's a bit of a slower burn in a position that's quite important. And if someone like Sanders does have goal kicking, I've got Sanders at the moment, and I haven't looked at the goal kicking competitions down at the ACT yet, but I need to double check. But if he's goal kicking, I've got him over him just because of that extra points, which I think could be important. But I like him. I'm struggling with where to put him at the moment. The other couple of guys we'll quickly touch on. There's the two wingers, Setu and Farley. Now, Setu looks like he's won the spot, 201,400. He's a must-have, and I like the look of him. Any centre wing that's 201,000 and got a starting spot, you just put them in and you've got them. So he's going to be one of the few that we can do centre wing for round one. And the other guy is Ryan Couchman, who is 235K, who we've seen do okay off the bench before with a good PPM, but does he just get 35 minutes again off the bench and then it's a real slow burn, which you can't afford to do. And bench forwards in the past, I've always said, most of the time they're SuperCoach poison because you do need the minutes. So, for me, it's a big tick for Setu. Got to have him in your side. For R. Couchman, I'm going to bench him and not put him in my side at all.
Yeah, I agree on Couchman. Those guys, they sometimes just become too slow of a burn. And even when you bring them in, someone and think, I'm having them for the bye period or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they just, the scores they end up throwing up, even though you don't have them in your team, they're so low that their price isn't rising fast enough for you to actually transition them into someone better. And if you do end up in a situation where emergencies in play, you're stuck with this consistently low score that it takes the captaincy loophole out of play, because it makes it not worth it, even if you've got a vice captain who pulls off a massive score. But if you're in a really bad situation where you legitimately need the auto emergency, you're not getting someone who's actually half decent.
Yeah, it's a big line through Ryan Couchman for all the reasons that you said, and probably a few more even. I do really like him in real life as a player, though. I think the Couchman brothers are going to be great for years to come, and adding Koloamatangi to that team, it's going to be a really nice young forward pack for the next few years. So I think that's the exciting thing for the Dragons. David Campbell came from the official SuperCoach show over to the NRL Allstars podcast to slum it. Really appreciate it. Man of the people and a great bloke, and also the second overall finisher. So we had to let everybody know about 2024 as well. Great SuperCoach mind. Really appreciate chatting to you today. So thanks very much for jumping on and talking Dragons with me.
Thanks for having me, and good luck for season 2026.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Make sure that you subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify so you can get the episodes straight away. It also helps support the show. And also jump on social media as well. You can find us on X, Facebook, and Insta. We've got another team preview coming out the next couple of days after the Dragons as well. So plenty coming out every single week. Really appreciate the comments and the support so far. And it's getting exciting. We're in trials as well this weekend again. And we're only a few weeks away from Vegas. So it's a great time of year. Enjoy playing around with your team. Can't wait to talk more footy again real soon.
You'll never know if you don't go. You'll never shine if you don't glow. Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play.